The blood-red sunset painted the horizon as Naomi Lawson clutched the locket at her throat, her heart pounding in rhythm with the approaching hoofbeats. Her father's debts had come due, and in Prosperity, Colorado, 1876, there was only one currency left to offer when the money ran dry: her future. "Miss Lawson," Sheriff Jenkins tipped his hat as he approached the small homestead, "I'm afraid the time has come." Naomi nodded stoically, though her insides trembled like autumn leaves. At 23, she'd always known this day might come. Her father's gambling had finally caught up to them after his passing 3 months prior. The bank wanted its money, and the town council had devised a solution that made her stomach turn auction her off as a bride to the highest bidder. "May I have a moment to gather my things?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Of course, miss. The auction's set for noon tomorrow. I'll escort you to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house for the night." Naomi stepped back into the cabin that had been her home for the past 5 years since moving west with her father. They'd come seeking opportunity after her mother's death, but found only hardship and mounting debt. She packed her modest belongings: 2 dresses, her mother's Bible, a hairbrush, and the silver locket containing her parents' portraits. As she closed the door behind her, she took one last look at the small homestead. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would never return here again. The town of Prosperity had never seemed so ominous as when Sheriff Jenkins escorted her down the main street. Windows opened as curious eyes peered out at her passage. Whispers followed in her wake. "That's the Lawson girl. Here they're auctioning her tomorrow. Thomas Whitaker's surely going to bid. Man needs a wife for that big ranch of his. Mrs. Holloway received her with a sympathetic smile and a warm meal, but Naomi could barely eat. The elderly widow patted her hand. "I know it seems awful, dear, but perhaps you'll find yourself married to a decent man. There are worse fates than becoming the wife of a wealthy rancher." "Being sold like cattle is among those worse fates," Naomi replied, then immediately regretted her sharpness. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Holloway, you've been kind. No need for apologies. Were I in your boots, I'd feel the same." She hesitated. "There's talk that Thomas Whitaker will be bidding. He's the richest rancher in the county, owns the Double W, not a cruel man, but—" She trailed off. "But what? He's particular in his ways. 45 years old and buried 2 wives already." Naomi felt the blood drain from her face. 2, childbirth took them both. "He's looking for someone sturdy to give him sons." Sleep eluded Naomi that night. Through the thin walls of the boarding house, she could hear the saloon's piano playing down the street and occasional bursts of laughter. Life in Prosperity continued while her own hung in the balance. As dawn broke, Mrs. Holloway brought her a breakfast she couldn't eat and helped her into her best dress, a modest blue calico that had seen better days but brought out the color of her eyes. Her honey blonde hair was pinned up neatly, though several stubborn tendrils had already escaped. "You look lovely, dear," Mrs. Holloway said, though her eyes were sad. By 11, a crowd had gathered in the town square. A small wooden platform had been erected where the sheriff stood with the mayor and a few town council members. Naomi was led to wait inside the general store until the proceedings began, but through the window, she could see men arriving on horseback from outlying ranches and farms. Her attention caught on one rider in particular, a lean cowboy on a dappled gray horse who rode in from the east. Unlike the others in their Sunday best, he wore simple work clothes, faded denim, a cotton shirt open at the collar, and a well-worn hat that shadowed his face. When he dismounted, she noticed he moved with an easy grace that spoke of a life lived in the saddle. "That's Colton Nash," the shopkeeper's wife whispered, following Naomi's gaze. "Works as a ranch handover at the Morrison place. Good man, but not a penny to his name." At precisely noon, Sheriff Jenkins came to escort Naomi to the platform. Her legs felt wooden as she climbed the 3 steps. From this vantage point, she could see the entire town had turned out for the spectacle. Women stood in clusters, whispering behind gloved hands. Men sized her up like they might a brood mare. Mayor Wilson cleared his throat. "Citizens of Prosperity, we gather today to settle the outstanding debts of the late Edward Lawson, which amount to $1,200 owed to the First Bank of Prosperity. As his sole heir, Miss Naomi Lawson has agreed to this arrangement." Naomi bit her tongue. Agreed was a generous interpretation. "We'll start the bidding at $500, the mayor announced. The successful bidder will take Miss Lawson's hand in marriage and assume all debts against the Lawson property. There was a moment of uncomfortable silence before a hand raised. 500, called a voice from the crowd. Naomi recognized the town's blacksmith, a widower with 4 young children. 600, came another bid. The amounts climbed steadily. Some men dropped out quickly, but a core group remained, including Thomas Whitaker, whose cold, assessing gaze never left Naomi's face. His wealth was evident in his fine suit and the gold watch chain that stretched across his substantial middle. 900, Whitaker called, his voice cutting through the chatter. A hush fell over the crowd. Few men in prosperity could match that sum. 900 going once. The mayor began. 950, called a new voice. The crowd parted to reveal the cowboy Naomi had noticed earlier. Colton Nash stepped forward, hat now in his hands, revealing dark hair and a sun-bronzed face. His eyes, a startling clear blue, locked with hers. Whispers erupted. Everyone knew Nash couldn't possibly have that kind of money. Thomas Whitaker laughed. $1,000, he said dismissively. Nash didn't flinch. 1,050, Whitaker's amusement turned to irritation. 1,100, 1,150, Nash's voice remained steady. You're wasting everyone's time, boy, Whitaker snapped. We all know you don't have this kind of money. Mayor Wilson looked uncomfortable. Mr. Nash, if you can't make good on your bid, I'll make good, Nash interrupted. His gaze remained fixed on Naomi. Something in those blue eyes made her breath catch. $1,200, Whitaker announced with finality. The exact amount of the debt, the crowd murmured. It was an overwhelming sum. The mayor looked ready to bring down his gavel when Nash spoke again. I can't match that in dollars, he said clearly, but I offer something more. He took a step forward. I'll win you with my soul, Miss Lawson. I offer my life, my labor, and my word that you'll never be treated as property again. The crowd fell silent. Naomi felt tears prickling behind her eyes at the simple dignity in his words. Whitaker snorted. This is a financial transaction, not a poetry recital. The mayor looked flustered. Mr. Nash, I'm afraid we need actual currency. Wait, Naomi found her voice. I should have some say in this, shouldn't I? The men on the platform exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, Sheriff Jenkins spoke up. The purpose is to settle the debt, Miss Lawson. Then let me propose this, she said, her mind racing. Mr. Whitaker offers enough to clear the debt. But Mr. Nash offers a partnership. She looked directly at Colton Nash. If he's willing to work the land my father left, we could make it profitable again. The bank would be paid in installments, and I'd have a future of my own choosing. Thomas Whitaker's face darkened. This is absurd. The girl clearly doesn't understand business. Actually, came a new voice, the lady makes a sound proposal. Amos Crawford, the bank manager, stepped forward. If Mr. Nash is willing to put in writing his commitment to regular payments with the property as collateral, I might consider it. Whitaker looked thunderstruck. You can't be serious, Crawford. The bank wants its money, Thomas, not a controversy. If the lady prefers this arrangement and the debt gets paid, I don't see the harm. All eyes turned to Colton Nash. He stood straight-backed, his hat still in his hands. I'll sign whatever's needed, he said, and I'll work from sunup to sundown to honor that commitment. Within the hour, papers were drawn up in the bank. Colton Nash signed his name to a contract promising monthly payments against the Lawson debt, while Naomi signed papers making him an equal partner in the homestead. It wasn't a marriage, but it bound their futures together nonetheless. As they left the bank, Whitaker blocked their path. You're making a grave mistake, Miss Lawson, he said coldly. This cowhand can't give you the life I could have. Naomi lifted her chin. Perhaps I prefer a life I've helped build to one I've been purchased into. Whitaker's eyes narrowed. We'll see how you feel when winter comes and you're scraping by. He turned to Nash. As for you, I'll remember this. After Whitaker stalked away, Naomi felt her bravado fade. He's right about one thing, winter will be hard. We'll manage, Colton said simply. I need to collect my things from the Morrison ranch. Will you be all right at Mrs. Holloway's for one more night? She nodded, suddenly uncertain about what she'd committed to. Mr. Nash, I should thank you for what you did today. Call me Colt, he said with a small smile. And no thanks needed. I couldn't stand by and watch what was happening. He hesitated. I should tell you straight I don't expect anything from you. This arrangement can be whatever you want it to be. Partners then, Naomi said, extending her hand. His calloused hand engulfed hers. Partners. Colton returned the following morning with his few possessions loaded onto his horse. Together they rode to the Lawson homestead. Naomi had feared returning would bring only sadness, but seeing it through new eyes, she recognized its potential. The cabin was small but sound. The barn needed repairs, but the corral was sturdy. The 20 acres her father had claimed included a creek and good grazing land. With work, it could sustain them. "What did you farm before?" Colt asked as they walked the property. "We tried wheat, but the soil's better suited to grazing." "My father kept thinking the next hand of cards would solve our problems, so we never fully committed to ranching. We could start small, a few cattle, some chickens. I've saved enough for that." His eyes scanned the horizon. "This is good land, Naomi." She was startled by his use of her given name, but found she didn't mind. "You really think we can make this work?" "I do." His confidence was contagious. They fell into a rhythm over the following days. Colt repaired the barn while Naomi tended the vegetable garden that had gone wild in her absence. They took their meals together, initially in awkward silence that gradually gave way to conversation. She learned he'd been orphaned young and raised by a series of ranchers who'd employed him since he was 13. He drifted through Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana before settling in prosperity 2 years earlier. He told her about breaking horses, driving cattle, and the long, lonely nights beneath western stars. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in Pennsylvania, her mother's illness, and her father's descent into gambling after losing the woman he loved. She found herself laughing at Colt's dry humor and admiring his unflagging work ethic. A month into their arrangement, Naomi woke to the sound of unfamiliar noises outside. She wrapped a shawl around her nightdress and peered through the window. In the early morning light, she saw Colt leading a cow and calf into their corral. Behind them came a wagon driven by an older man she recognized as Frank Peterson, whose small ranch bordered Whitaker's land. The wagon held chicken coops and what appeared to be several young heifers. She hurriedly dressed and went outside. "Morning," Colt called, a smile brightening his tanned face. "Brought us some livestock." "I can see that," she said, approaching cautiously. "How did you?" "Made a deal with Frank here. I'll break some horses for him in exchange." He gestured to the animals. 3 milk cows, 5 heifers for breeding, and a dozen chickens. "It's a start." Frank Peterson tipped his hat. "Nash here's the best horse breaker in the county. Figured it was a fair trade." He gave Naomi an appraising look. "You got yourself a good partner, Miss Lawson. Man knows value when he sees it." After Peterson left, Naomi helped Colt settle the animals. "You didn't tell me about this plan," she said, not accusingly. "Wasn't sure it would work out." He hesitated. "Are you pleased?" The simple question touched her. "Very pleased. It's perfect, actually." His smile lit something warm inside her. "Good. I thought we could fence the north pasture next. There's a spring there that'll water the cattle through summer." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Naomi realized how comfortable their silence had become. Colt whittled a piece of pine while she darned socks. "I made our first payment to the bank today," he said without looking up. Mr. Crawford seemed surprised. "I imagine many people are surprised by us," she replied. "Does that bother you?" Now he did look at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Not anymore. It was the truth. The whispers in town when they went for supplies had stung at first, but she'd grown immune to them. "People will always talk. They're saying I got the better deal a homestead and a—" He trailed off embarrassed. "A woman," she finished for him. "Is that what you think? That you've gotten yourself both property and a female to go with it?" "No," he said sharply. "Never that." His hands stilled their work. "I think I got a partner who's smarter and braver than most men I know." The simple honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "Thank you, Colt." Summer passed in a blur of hard work and small triumphs. The vegetable garden flourished under Naomi's care. Colt built additional corrals and repaired fences. The chickens produced eggs that Naomi sold in town, and the milk cows provided both milk for themselves and extra to trade for supplies. News came that Thomas Whitaker had married a shipping magnate's daughter from Denver, a woman with a substantial dowry who, according to town gossip, spent most of her time weeping for the city life she'd left behind. "Poor woman," Naomi said when she heard. They were sharing supper at their small table, a routine that had become the highlight of her days. "You could have been in her place," Colt observed, passing her the cornbread. "I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted between them, a recognition neither was ready to name. The seasons changed. Fall brought cattle drives as ranchers moved herds to winter pastures. Colt was hired to help with several, bringing in much-needed cash. During his absences, Naomi found herself watching the road for his return, her heart lifting at the sight of his distinctive silhouette on horseback. On a crisp October evening, Naomi sat by the fire knitting when Colt burst through the door, his face alight with excitement. "Whitaker's selling off part of his western range," he announced without preamble. "500 acres bordering our property. The price is high, but it has the best water access for miles." "We can't afford that," she said, practical as always. "Not now, but I've been thinking." He pulled a chair close to hers. "What if we took in boarders? There are always cowboys looking for winter lodging. We've got the barn, it wouldn't take much to make it habitable." Naomi considered this. "We'd need more beds, linens. I can build bunks and Mrs. Peterson mentioned she has spare bedding she'd trade for eggs." His enthusiasm was infectious. "We could charge for meals too. You're the best cook in the county." She blushed at the compliment. "It's a sound idea, but Colt, even with that income, land like that would take years to save for." "I know, but it's something to work toward, isn't it? A dream for the future." Our future, she thought. The concept no longer frightened her, instead it filled her with quiet joy. Winter arrived with bitter winds and heavy snow. Colt's idea proved prescient. 3 cowboys paid for lodging in the converted barn, bringing not only income but help with winter chores and lively conversation around the supper table. On Christmas Eve, Naomi prepared a special dinner. She'd saved sugar and dried fruits for weeks to make a proper pudding, and traded eggs for coffee, a luxury they rarely indulged in. The boarders had ridden into town for Christmas festivities, leaving Naomi and Colt alone for the first time in weeks. She set the table with her mother's tablecloth, preserved through all their hardships, and lit candles. Colt entered from tending the animals, then stopped short at the sight. "What's all this?" "Merry Christmas," she said, suddenly shy. "I wanted to make it special." "You've certainly managed that." He disappeared briefly, returning with something hidden behind his back. "I have something for you too." From behind his back, he produced a small, rectangular package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "It isn't much." Naomi unwrapped it carefully to reveal a hand-carved wooden box with intricate leaf patterns adorning the lid. "Oh, Colt," she breathed, running her fingers over the detailed work. "Open it," he urged. Inside, nestled in a scrap of soft fabric, was a silver hairpin with a small pearl at its tip. "It's beautiful," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "I saved from the horse-breaking work," he explained. "Wanted you to have something pretty." "I love it," she said truthfully. "But I feel terrible. I haven't got anything for you." "You've given me a home, Naomi," he said quietly. "That's more than I ever expected to have." The intensity of his gaze made her heart race. Impulsively, she leaned forward and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "Thank you." His hand caught hers as she began to pull away. For a long moment they remained frozen, the contact between them electric with possibility. "Naomi," he said, his voice rough. "I need to say something." She nodded, unable to speak. "These months with you, they've been the best of my life." He took a deep breath. "I know our arrangement began as a business partnership, but my feelings have changed. I care for you deeply." "I care for you too," she whispered. "If you want to keep things as they are, I'll respect that. But I want you to know that She didn't let him finish. Finding courage she didn't know she possessed to close the distance between them and press her lips to his. His surprise lasted only a moment before he responded, one hand cupping her face with infinite tenderness. When they finally parted, Colt rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day of the auction," he confessed. "Why didn't you?" "I needed you to know I wasn't claiming what I'd supposedly purchased." She smiled against his lips. "I think we both know I wasn't purchased. I was one heart and soul." That night changed everything and nothing. Their work continued, caring for animals, repairing buildings, selling eggs and milk in town, but now they moved through their days as true partners in every sense. In February, during a rare trip to town together, they encountered Thomas Whitaker outside the general store. His gaze lingered on their clasped hands, his expression sour. "Nash," he acknowledged coldly. "Miss Lawson." "Mrs. Nash, actually," Naomi replied with a smile. They'd married quietly the previous month, with only the preacher and Mrs. Holloway as witnesses. Whitaker's eyebrows rose. "Indeed. Well, I suppose congratulations are in order." His tone suggested otherwise. "Though I still maintain you could have done better for yourself." "I couldn't possibly have done better," Naomi said firmly. Colt squeezed her hand. "How's your wife settling in, Whitaker?" A shadow crossed the rancher's face. "Returned to her father in Denver last week. Apparently ranch life didn't agree with her." He tipped his hat stiffly and continued on his way. "Poor man," Colt murmured as they watched him go. "You pity him?" Naomi was surprised. "All that money, all that land, and he's alone." He looked down at her, his eyes soft. "I may not have his wealth, but I'm the richest man in Colorado." Spring arrived, bringing new life to the ranch. Their small herd increased with the birth of calves. The garden was planted, the chickens were laying prolifically, and the boarders who'd stayed through winter paid their final bills before moving on. One warm evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Naomi shared her news. "I'm with child." Colt's face transformed with wonder. He knelt before her chair, hands gentle on her still flat stomach. "Are you certain?" Dr. Wilson confirmed it today. "The baby should arrive in November." Tears filled his eyes as he pressed his lips to her hands. "I never thought I'd have this a family of my own." "Nor did I," she admitted. "Especially not after the auction. I thought my life was over that day. Instead, it was just beginning." He moved to sit beside her, drawing her close. "I promised to win you with my soul. I hope I've kept that promise." "Every day," she whispered, resting her head against his shoulder, "and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." The years that followed proved prosperous beyond their hopes. Their first child, a son they named Edward after Naomi's father, arrived healthy and strong. 2 years later, a daughter, Sarah, joined the family. The ranch expanded as they gradually purchased neighboring parcels, including, eventually, the coveted western range that had once belonged to Thomas Whitaker, who sold his holdings and returned east after his second marriage also failed. On the 5th anniversary of the auction, Colt surprised Naomi with a new silver locket to replace the worn one that had belonged to her mother. Inside, he'd placed tiny portraits of their children. "To remember how far we've come," he said as he fastened it around her neck. Standing in the doorway of their expanded home, watching their children play in the yard, Naomi reflected on the journey. The auction that had seemed like an ending had instead been her salvation, bringing her not just security but a love deeper than she'd ever imagined possible. Colt's arms encircled her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Nash?" She turned in his embrace, reaching up to trace the lines that hard work and laughter had etched around his eyes. "I was thinking that some things can't be bought for any price." "Like what?" he asked, smiling down at her. "Like a man's soul," she replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him as the western sun bathed their home in golden light.